If I look a little tired this morning, it's because I spent the last week with our youth on their mission trip. And on behalf of all of them, I want to thank you for all the pizzas you bought and all the prayer you put into this trip. It was a great trip, had a wonderful time. It was the first time I've ever showered in a tent with a water hose as my drain coming down. It was cold, but it was good. But what made the trip so special for me is that my son was on it. My 12-year-old son, Elijah, went on his first mission trip. Now, he's been able to go on mission trips with us. My wife and I have done campus ministry for 19 years and went on lots of different mission trips. But the day he heard about the Elevate mission trip, he came and said, I want to do that. I want to be on a trip of my own. So it was so fun to go with him and the other 8 kids who were on that trip. And I spend a lot of time with that kid. He is a little bit of a mini-me, my 12-year-old son, but in part because I coach him. I'm one of his coaches on the baseball team. I refer to myself more as a team psychologist on the baseball team. I help manage the emotion of a bunch of 12-year-old boys. It's a lot of work. I think it's more than the head coaches have, but don't tell them I said that. But we spend a lot of time together, and baseball is a lot different than when I was young. When I was young, I remember the aluminum bat with a rubber handle. Now they have bats that cost $400 that can hit a ball further than I could have ever imagined. And the other thing that's different among the many is that they've picked up this thing they do in Major League Baseball where they have walk-up songs. So in Major League Baseball, if you're familiar with baseball or not, the batter who is on deck stands in a circle and waits till the batter before him is finished, and then as he takes his approach to the plate, a 10 to 15 second song clip plays. And it's kind of their way to pump themselves up and get ready for their at-bat. Now they do that in youth baseball. So every March and April, Elijah spends time figuring out the perfect 10 to 15 seconds that he can have to walk up. And every year it's been a Christian rap song. This year it's a song by a rapper named No Big Deal. And it's been really fun because it's been this catchy anthem that our team will be just singing in the dugout as Elijah comes to the plate or through the rest of the game. Well, we had a tournament recently where we decided to do something a little different. And moms got to pick the walk-up song for their son. Now, some moms use this as a chance to embarrass their child. Elijah's mom and my wife, Hillary, is a good mom and chose not to do that. So she decided she would talk with him and figure out what song do we both like that could kind of be meaningful for us. And so Elijah liked some of the 90s, early 2000 Christian rock bands that we liked, Switchfoot, and then older like Need to Breathe. And so she started talking to them, what about one of the songs from them? And he was oddly resistant. Like, this is a kid who's not usually shy about his faith. He's going on a missions trip. His whole team knows it. But there was something about this that he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he kind of dug his heels in. And so I take him aside and I'm like, hey, buddy, what's going on? Why are you so resistant to this? Are you afraid someone's going to make fun of you? He's like, yeah, what if the other team thinks it's weird? And I kind of get that Papa Bear, like, who has made fun of you for your faith? And he starts to tell me, and I'm like, well, has that happened? He's like, yeah, Dad, you did it. You made fun of a kid's walk-up song last year when it was a worship song. And my heart just dropped. I'm like, when did I do that? And he's like, there was a kid who had a song, and you said, that's an odd choice. And in my mind, I thought it was just, I said it because I thought it was an odd choice because it was really slow, and most of the time the songs are like upbeat. But it was such a good reminder of me of how much our words matter. Because this was a flippant comment that I had made during a game about how I thought this was an odd choice. And what my son heard was it was odd because it was a Christian song. And you're going to get made fun of if you do that. And I was just floored. But it's such a good reminder for me because I say things off the cuff all the time. If you know me, I like to talk. And there are times where I just say things and I don't think them through. And this comment, a year later, was still sitting in the head and the heart of my son. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. We're going to look at the book of James. We're going to continue to walk through it. And we're going to look at how James talks about our words and how much our words matter and why. So we're going to pick up in James chapter 3 as we continue to go through the book of James. And it starts this way in verse 1. It says, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. We're not going to spend a lot of time on these couple verses, but it is the lead-in to what James is going to talk about. He talks about how not many people should teach because of all the words that you use. The words you say reflect who you are, your walk with Jesus, and your words reflect even your sanctification in your walk with Jesus. He's saying not many people should teach. I don't think many people would have expected to read this part of James. But he goes on to explain why. He says, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Now that is a bold start to this section. James is repeating over and over something to get to the point of what he wants us to see here. As I was reading this, I thought back to about 10 years ago. I was working in Minnesota, and I was at our office. And I was working at our office, and I started to get this pain, like right here in my side. And I like to pride myself on being pretty tough, but within an hour, I couldn't sit down anymore. I was trying to stand to be comfortable, and after a while, that got too hard. So I'm like looking on WebMD, which is the worst thing ever to do, because I had myself convinced in like 15 minutes my appendix was rupturing, and I didn't know what was going on. And one of our staff actually takes me to the emergency room because I don't know what's going on. This pain is so intense. And in the course of just a few questions, the doctor is able to diagnose very quickly what's wrong with me. And it's that I had a kidney stone. Now, if you've ever had a kidney stone, they are so painful. There are women who I've talked to who have said they have given birth to a child and passed a kidney stone, and they would choose birth of a child over a kidney stone. But what's crazy about a kidney stone is this is how big they are. A kidney stone is about the size of a small grain of rice. Something that small took me out. Like I was just out. Until they got the drugs in my system, I could not sit up. And there are people who have this all the time. Now, it's part of the size and what it's going through in your body and the jaggedness of it. But it's the same picture that James is getting across, that something really small can have a lot of power. James wants us to see how our words, though seeming small, have great power. And he uses 3 examples, repeats himself. It's almost like, okay, I got it, James. By the end, he goes from the idea of a bit in a horse's mouth, then he moves to the rudder of a ship, and then he moves to a spark. But he wants us to see this. The bit in the mouth of a horse. Think of a horse. It's this big, majestic animal. And yet we put a small bit in its mouth to steer it around, to get it to go where we want it to go. Or a rudder on a ship. I know nothing about boats. I mean, I've been on one, but I don't know how they work. And I looked it up. The rudder is anywhere from 1/100th to 1/1000th the size of the ship. But that's what steers the ship. Something so little. If that goes wrong, if something goes wrong with the rudder, your ship is in a lot of trouble. Or a small spark. I mean, we've seen over the last 5 years story after story of wildfires that have started all over our country. And the crazy thing with wildfires is often we don't know how they start. They start at some point, but they turn into these really large things. Well, a few years back, there was actually a fire in El Dorado, California, that they know the start of. It started from a gender reveal. So a couple was having a baby, and sometimes you do a gender reveal and you cut into a cake and it's pink or blue. They decided to do something a little different. They exploded something into the sky. There was a burn ban, the winds were bad, but they thought it'd be okay. A spark took from the gender reveal and wiped out 23,000 acres, 4 homes, 5 buildings, and took the life of a firefighter, all from one small spark. James, over and over, 3 different ways, wants us to see that our tongue, that our words are small, but they are powerful. The words you say have power. But it's not just in James chapter 3. James actually does this throughout his book. We've talked about kind of the circular nature of James, how he brings things up and then he brings it back up again. In James 1, he talks about the idea of how we should be slow to speak. He talks about speech in a way that there's power in it, so be slow. Listen more, speak less. I'm not good at this. I like to talk. But what James reminds you is if your words have power, be wise in how you use them. So think about it. Just after that, he talks about those of us who can't control our speech are deceiving ourselves in James chapter 1. And even goes on to say that your religion is worthless. That's a bold statement. Later in James chapter 1, he goes on, or in James chapter 4, he goes on to talk about 2 different ways that our speech are used that are negative. He talks in James 4:11, he talks about slander. How we use our speech to attack other people. We speak ill of them, and usually we slander someone for one of 2 different reasons. For self-protection, like we want to protect ourselves, so we talk poorly about someone else. It's that thing when you're doing something poorly, you want to point out to someone else who's doing it just a little worse. I get to see this when I coach. Like one kid's struggling, but he's like, yeah, that kid's struggling way worse, so I'm going to talk about him. But he goes on later, and he talks about the opposite end of this. He talks about boasting. So slander we often use for self-protection. Boasting we use for self-promotion. Our words, we know they have power. They have power to protect us from how people view us. They have power to promote our view of other people. We say things so we look just a little bit better. And James knows how powerful our words are, and it's throughout his whole letter. But it's not just in the book of James. It's all over the Bible. I could spend the rest of my time reading different passages that talk about this. The Proverbs alone had around 20 examples of the power of our speech. I have one up there, and in this one I love because it talks about how our words can be deep waters that bring knowledge and wisdom and life into the world, but they can also bring our demise. Our words can be used for good and knowledge, but it can also bring demise. Jesus in Matthew, in that passage up there, says this. He says, it's not what goes into your mouth which defiles you, but that which comes out of your mouth. And this is to a culture of people who had all these different laws about what you could eat. And he says it's not actually about what goes into your mouth. It's about what comes out. Jesus knew what our words could do. And then in all the epistles and letters, there's so many different examples of them talking about our speech. But I love Ephesians 4:29, in part because I struggle so much with my speech. This is one of the verses I memorized early on. It says, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, only that which is good for building one another up. Our speech can build up or tear down. Our words have power. And I think we know this. We see this in culture. We see examples of people's speech tearing others apart. But we also have examples of where speech brings life. And I want to show a clip from a movie here, from the movie Good Will Hunting. Now, I know any of you who've seen Good Will Hunting, you're like, well, there's a lot of not so great language in Good Will Hunting. We found an edited clip, so that's just good for you to know. It's one of my favorite movies. In fact, when Hillary and I went to Boston, we found the park bench where Matt Damon and Robin Williams' character have this really important scene in the movie, and we have a picture from it. But I think this scene does a great job showing the power of our words. So we're going to play it.
So, what is it like? Will has an attachment disorder? Is it all that stuff? Fear of abandonment? You want to talk about it? No.
Hey, Will. I don't know a lot. You see this? This is not your fault. Look at me, son. It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
I know.
No, you don't. It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
All right.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
So this scene moves on with Matt Damon's character, Will, just weeping in the arms of Robin Williams. Because the words that he says to him help him see, help for the first time him maybe think that it's not his fault, all this stuff that has happened to him. This terrible life that he had, all these things. And it's this example of how just a few words can have so much power. A few words can have a negative power. Just saying something like, hey, I think it's odd that they chose this as a walk-up song, had power in my son. To say, I don't want to do that. But also has power to break down things in our heart. To let God into spaces that we hadn't before. So James wants us to see our words have power, but as we go on, we see more of why our words matter so much. We're going to jump ahead to verse 9. It says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. What's interesting is James does the same thing he did earlier here. He uses 3 or 4 different examples to hit a point home. In just a short time, he talks about different trees. He talks about how we praise the Lord with our mouth, and then we curse human beings. And I think this is kind of the example of last worship song, you're all in, you're praising the Lord, and then in the car you start gossiping about someone you had just talked to. Or you start to be hypercritical of your spouse, or you kind of lose your cool with your kids. Because what James wants us to see is that our words aren't just what come out of our mouth. Our words reveal our heart. Our words have power, but they also reveal our heart. And James is focused here on what I would say is the incongruency of our faith sometimes, where we say one thing, but in our heart something else is going on, and we think we can mask our speech for a while. We think we can just go through the motion. We think we can fake it, but every time you're kind of found out. And it's because what's going on in our heart comes out through our speech after a while. And James, who often quoted from Proverbs or from his half-brother Jesus, picks this one up straight out of one of Jesus' teachings in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus says this when talking about where our speech comes from. I think it'll be on the screen behind us. He says, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars, so very similar to what James was saying. A good man brings good things out of the good stored in his heart, and an evil man brings out evil things out of the evil stored in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. What comes out of our mouth isn't an accident. Sometimes you'll hear people say something kind of inflammatory or something. We've seen it with people who've made like sexist comments or racist comments or other comments, and we're like, well, that's not really who they are. I think what Jesus would say is, it's at least who they are in that moment. Because those words came from somewhere. They weren't an accident. No, it doesn't define the whole of who you are over the course of your life, but it is true of something going on in your life at that moment. When I snap at my kids, it's not an accident. It might be an accident I said it, but it's actually something that's born out of the fruit of my heart. What comes out of our mouths started in our heart. And so our words can reveal what's going on inside of us. And as someone, throughout this whole time, I've said this is a really kind of personal talk for me because I struggle with my words. As someone who uses a lot of them, they can get me in trouble sometimes. And one of the best passages that I look at when I think of my words, when I want to take an audit, is actually go to Galatians. Because in it, Paul talks about the fruit of our flesh versus the fruit of our spirit. And I think about that in my words. What are true? Are my words the fruit of flesh or the fruit of spirit? So I have back here just a list of the fruit of the flesh versus the fruit of the spirit. So think about this with our words. Immorality or impurity. Is it easy for you to have crude jokes just kind of pop up? For that to be something that's easy for you to talk about? Maybe not, but let's go to discord or quarreling. Are you the kind of person who always needs to be right? Your words become combative in an argument almost all the time? How about jealousy? I think this is where we talked about slander and gossip. Most of the time, that comes from jealousy. You see somebody have something you want, and you want to, with your words, just kind of tear them down just a little bit. Fits of rage. This can show up in parenting. It can show up at your job. It can show up driving. But that shows what's going on in your heart. Selfish ambition, this desire to boast and promote ourselves so we look better than other people. Have you ever told a story and you left out the details that made you look bad, but left in all the ones that make you look good? Selfish ambition. Dissensions, factions, division. Speech, I think in our current culture, more than anything, is used to divide. We talk about how we hate those who disagree with us. I was sitting across from a student a while back, and he was talking to me about a group of people who voted differently than him, and he used the phrase libtards to describe them. This is a Christian leader in our ministry. And I looked over across the table at him, I'm like, you can't use that. We cannot talk like that as Christians. Because think of what two words you just put together. And it kind of floored him. I don't think he had even thought about what he said. But he had just heard it over and over. And this can happen all across political aisles and can go across everything. But our words are often used to divide and bring discord. And then lastly, envy or coveting, talking in that way. So that's how we have some speech. But what if the fruit that was born of our speech was the fruit of the Spirit? What if your speech was filled with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control? What if that was what was revealed in your speech? Because God is doing a work in your heart. What is revealed to you, through you, is that fruit. I don't think it's a bold statement to say, if I asked every one of you, which side would you want to be revealed in your speech? You would want the fruit of the Spirit. We don't walk around wanting fits of anger. I think we want to bring joy and love in how we speak. But what is our speech revealing about our heart? So we have this setup. James has given us this reality that our speech, our words are powerful. Our words reveal our heart. And I think at this point it can feel fairly heavy. And it's not going to get any less heavy for a second. Because we skipped a part at verse 7 where it says this: all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. right in the middle of the section. I've read James a lot in my life. I was talking to Hillary about it yesterday, and I said, this was the first time I noticed that it doesn't say tame your tongue. That's the headline on it, but if you actually look at the passage, it says, no human being can tame their tongue. No one. Amen, service is over. That would be a bad place to stop. But James wants us to see the gravity of our speech, how this is not something we can do. He's like, you can tame any animal. We can walk to the zoo and see animals behind cages. You can't tame your tongue. It comes out on your own. James isn't saying our speech can't reflect God, but he's saying no human on their own can do it. If I try to act patient and say the right things, after a while, if my kids keep pushing, something comes out if my heart is not in the right place. James wants to point us to the fact that we are not the ones who can tame our tongue. It's going to take work. Our words, to have them the way we want them to be, to honor God, takes work. I'd say it leads to the big idea is that our words matter, but they are worth the work. Because if our words can bring life instead of death, if they can bring joy instead of despair, if they can bring unity and peace instead of discord and dissension, we want to work at them. But we need to know where to start. And the first thing we need to know is that heart change has to happen first. Like, it has to come first. You could read a book on how to say the right things, but if your heart doesn't change in the moments of pressure, what's really going on in your heart's going to happen. We need to be honest about what's going on in our heart. So in those times where I do struggle and raise my voice with the kids and snap at them, I can't blame them for it. I need to ask, what's going on in my heart? What's going on there? Is it my need for control? Is that my need for them to look a certain way in a public setting? Because that's me. That's something going on in my heart. And we can trace back most of our speech to something going on in our heart if we're willing to do the work. We need to be honest about what's going on. If you want a quick fix, you probably can have it for a little while, but that's not going to address the real issue. And then we need to be dependent on the Lord. So it's one thing to be honest. Oh, there's a lot going on here in my heart. But then we need to turn to Him. We need to confess what's going on, and we need to rely on Him. We need to say, I trust you. This is the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. I need you to change what's going on in here so what comes out of here isn't the way that it is. Because I think we live in a time where, we talk about taming your tongue in this text. I think that's right. But I think if Paul and James and the other writers who've talked about speech were here today, they would say it's a lot more than just your words. Now we have our fingertips. Because it's really easy to send a quick text that's also loaded with emotion, or comment on something on social media. That's speech too. So what is that speech revealing? Our hearts need to be transformed. And second, we need to let others in. I'm convinced that every part of our spiritual walk grows more if we let other people in. We were supposed to do this in community. Speech has to be at the top of that. Because almost all of our speech is done in community unless you're talking to yourself a lot. So we need other people to be able to see in, share our struggles with them, be honest, but also let them speak into it. That's the part we don't really want. We want to let others actually speak in, give them license to share what they see. To say, hey, I've noticed you haven't actually been that encouraging to your spouse. You've been pretty critical. Is there something happening there? For some of us, that makes us shiver even thinking about letting other people do that. But that's how we grow. Letting other people even into your struggles with speech, what's coming out of your mouth, and asking them to point out, but also to encourage you when they see it go well. I have purposely not had a lot of techniques because I think we're too easy to want the quick fix. And I want us to remember and to sit in this, that this is at the heart level. But I do think there's a couple things we can do with our speech that help our heart. And I just put a couple up here. One, we can praise the Lord. I think that's actually in the text. James talks about that. But the two that I came up with that have been so helpful for me is to encourage and apologize. This may seem simple, but the more I go around looking for ways to encourage people to see the dignity of God in them, to see God at work in their lives, the more it does something to my heart. I shared a lot of examples today, even from coaching youth baseball, but I'll give you one more. There's a kid on our team who, during one of our last games, had this incident where he kind of blew up. And I remember I took him over and started talking with him and just said, what happened there wasn't okay. But I knew this was a time where I could continue to beat into that, or it was a time where I could encourage him. And I just told him, but do you want to know, we love having you on our team. You're the best teammate we have. You cheer for everybody. Your emotions are up here, and sometimes they go sideways, but when you're here, you're the best at that. And just spoke encouragement into him. And then he came back the next game and was the best fan of every kid on that team. And I caught him after the game, and I just said, hey, I want you to know how proud I am of how you responded today after yesterday. And you could see him light up. Our words have so much power. And just taking time to encourage other people, to speak that God-given dignity into them, has so much power. But on the other side of it, it's to apologize as well. I think I've apologized more in the last 12 years as being a dad as I did all my life leading up to it. Because I screw up a lot. But I could choose not to apologize. I could choose to say, hey, I'm doing everything right. It's you guys who are bad. But learning how to say, I'm sorry. And not just flippantly to get through a situation. We like to apologize to make things seem good and move on, but to really apologize. I'm sorry, what I did there was wrong because I was projecting something on you that happened earlier in the day. And that was not fair to you. It brings humility. It's actually living out the gospel that we are not perfect and we don't have to be, that God has forgiven us, and we ask for forgiveness from them and we move forward. Encouraging people, apologizing to people can be such a great way for our speech to be something that brings life and at the same time transforms us. And there's a lot more we could talk about. But I want us to see, and I want, like James says, to see that our words have power. That our words reveal what is going on in our heart. And it takes work if we want to see our words become words that bring life. But it's so worth it. Because imagine the outside world who is watching the church and waiting for us often to do the wrong thing. Imagine if we were a place where our words were the fruit of the Spirit, that people interacted with us and saw us as people who spoke love, joy, peace, spoke with patience and self-control. That doesn't mean we don't act like things aren't sin that are sin. We can still speak into it, but we can do it with love. If we were people who are trying to unify in times of division, think of the witness that would be to the world around us. It's worth the work for that. Let me pray. Jesus, we thank you that though this is heavy to think about our words and what is going on there, we know that we're not alone in this. We have your Spirit at work in us to help produce that in our hearts. So would we be a people whose fruit of our speech is the fruit of your Spirit? Amen.